Wonderful. Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. We're delighted to have my friends Chase and Alex lead the switch. And we've been discussing Outwitting the Devil, one of my favorite books by Napoleon Hill. So take it away, Chase and Alex.
All right. Thanks, Shrikant. So I got a little bit of feedback from last week, and we're going to do in 2 minutes or less quick summary of Outwitting the Devil for anyone who has not read it yet and is just joining us for the very first time. This is a series. However, you're welcome to jump in at any point in time. Don't feel like you need to catch up. Quick overview. Outwitting the Devil, written by Napoleon Hill. He was the author of Think and Grow Rich, which most people know that's what he's really known for. Outwitting the Devil was another project. Now, Think and Grow Rich is all about what it sounds like. It's success principles for how to grow rich. Outwitting the Devil was a result of Napoleon Hill's study of failure, and it's presented as this interrogation of the devil, where the devil divulges all of his secrets about how he causes people to do what he calls drifting. Now, drifting is anything that takes you away from your purpose in life. He says the cure to drifting is definiteness of purpose, and lists a bunch of principles that lead you away from drifting. This is what we're working on every week, is this list of principles. And we're working on it arbitrarily out of the order of the book. This week is week 3, which puts us on our second principle. Did I do that math right? Yes, because the first week was a recap of the book. Now, there are exercises associated with each of the weeks that we're studying these principles. I would encourage you to go back and just look at the descriptions of the exercises for each week and commit 5 minutes to each exercise to catch back up. For example, the very first exercise is to get a good overview picture of the book. Each exercise is also scalable. It's the kind of thing where if you've only got 2 minutes to dedicate to it, you're going to get something out of it. But the more time that you do put in, the more you'll get out of it. So the exercise for last week is what we're going to start with. If anybody has completed the exercise for last week, please put it in the chat. If you're willing to talk about it, that's great. Put that in the chat as well. Alex and I are going to go over our experience doing the exercise real quick. Then anybody who did the exercise from last week can chime in on their experience, and we will move on to this week's principle. And today we're going to be trying something new. We're going to do the exercise live in 5 minutes or less. So last minute prep. If anybody does not have something like paper and pencil or a notebook or something where you can take notes and follow along with the exercise at the end, make sure that at some point in the next few minutes, you have that available to you. All right. So Alex, are we ready to get started?
I think we are.
Cool. So the exercise for last week was this. We were working with the principle, do your own thinking on all occasions. The fact that human beings are given complete control over nothing save the power to think their own thoughts is laden with significance. So again, do your own thinking on all occasions. The exercise was to look at some thoughts, maybe beliefs that you have, and analyze them using the following metric. Number 1, valence. That's emotional. It means, is this a happy thought or a sad thought? Is this a preferred thought or a dispreferred thought? A good thought or a bad thought? Whatever is the most salient for you. Value. Is this delivering you value in your life? Is it moving you closer to your goals, or is it distracting you? Number 3, source. Where are you getting this thought from? Have you inherited it from other people? Did you come up with it yourself? Is it your insecurities and your subconscious mind speaking to you? And last is counterfactual thinking. I'm not going to go into counterfactuals today. You will see a couple of examples of how people interpreted the counterfactual thing, but go back to last week to hear about counterfactuals in detail. So, Alex, you want to start us off?
Sure. So my first thought was, and belief was, honesty is more important than conforming or comforting. And the valence of that is preferred. It's something that is, to me, it's not either good or bad, but it provides a consistency to my worldview, which is assuring and simplifying. with value. Does it deliver value? Yes, it helps create trust in my relationships. And it offers, as I mentioned, a consistent strategy to confront tricky interpersonal situations. But it also assumes that everybody is in a psychological space to be able to absorb it. The source, so how I believe this and why, is primarily from Sam Harris's book, Lying. He really sold me on this idea, particularly through a lot of the real life examples that resonated with me. Those conformed to my intuitions about social interaction, but it expanded what I already thought about lying to even be white lies and believing that those are almost always bad. Lying deprives people of another viewpoint of reality, therefore treating them like children who can't handle the truth. And this goes against my intuitions about how I want to interact with other people. Another reason I believe this is because that I believe Sam has a strong epistemology, and I trust his methods for assessing life morals. And I feel like our intuitions about that align. And this belief is perpetuated by my innate drive for consistency in my morals and one-size-fits-all solutions. Although that drive, I believe, can be unhelpful for me, as it can lead me to desire overly simplified solutions. Oh, and the last one, it just feels bad to lie. The counterfactual thinking, the questions I would ask myself to determine if these were true. If lying was not the best, if lying was a better method of operating, how would I know? Would I be shown firsthand that it was incorrect? Or would I experience a slow deterioration of what I expected to get from my relationships from not lying? Would the relationships weaken if what I believed was untrue? On an emotional level, would I feel better if I lied more? Is that worthwhile to think about? And would Sam be respected the same way he is by a lot of people for his epistemology if it was generally unreliable?
Awesome. Yeah, that's a very deep way of analyzing that. Thank you for providing that example. Do you feel like you got something out of going through this exercise?
Yeah, I did. And I think after going through it, and if there's other people looking to go into it, personally, I think I have a lot more of the things that I would put as preferred in valence. But what I thought about as I was going through it, the ones that I actually thought were dispreferred, I think were more important for me to do this process with, because I think those can have a more of an impact. But I do think it was good for me to go through this because it's something that I believe that I've also kind of had some questions about, because it pretty much is a never lie ever. There's no exceptions. And I do think it's important to analyze that, believing such a strong principle. And I feel like it kind of reinforced what I already thought. But if anything, I do feel a little less sold on it.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I think one of the things, and I'll go through mine as well, but one of the things that I noticed when you were talking about this is the more you describe it, the more it felt to me like you were zeroing in on more like a proper confidence in your idea, where, if you held this idea like very, very confidently, 99% confidently, then maybe you're zeroing in on a more appropriate 92%, right? Or if you were not confident enough, you were, dialing that up, you were getting into the right range in confidence. And I had the same intuition when I started to go through this exercise, that even something that's a preferred thought, I'm going to be more comfortable with my confidence level in believing that thought as I analyze it using this metric. Now, that's not to say that this metric is perfect. Of course, there are probably ways to improve it. We can potentially go through that, but I think this is a useful way of thinking. All right, so let me go through mine. Sorry, did you have a comment?
I think what I think of when you mention that is the I feel like it needs to be discussed with other people to point out some of the flaws in this, some of the things that don't come up, because although I do think there's a huge value in going through this alone, because the whole idea is about using your thinking brain and just assuming, but I do think there's an important interaction when it comes to communicating with other people to expose those weak points or blind spots.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So my thought, quote, I'm not qualified to be working in the communications coaching job that I have. It's a departure from my chosen field of expertise. Now, just a word of warning, if anybody who's involved in me doing that job hears this, this is, stick it out through the analysis. So, valence, number one, that's a dispreferred thought. I don't like feeling that thought. I'd rather not feel unqualified for a job that I have. Value, it's probably not a valuable thought because it is, as ads put in the chat there, it's self-defeating, right? By believing that I'm not qualified, I'm probably undermining my performance. I'm probably performing at a lower level than I could be if I'm thinking that to myself all the time. Now, this actually brings me to one of the metrics that I did not put in this, but that you probably noticed when you started analyzing this, which is how strongly do you believe this thought? How often does it come up? What kind of magnitude does it have? Because for me, this one would be a low magnitude thought. I don't often think this. It does come up more than once, more than occasionally, but it's not a dominating thought in my case. Okay, so continuing on valence, if this is a distraction from my career, this thought does help keep me focused. So if, for example, even if I'm qualified, I shouldn't be doing this, this thought actually could help me refocus on what I should be doing. So in that case, it might be slightly helpful, but I do think that it's more self-defeating than helpful. Because it may blind me to the growth potential that is there. And, the job may lead to more things that can also be fulfilling that I'd be good at. So anyway, I think the source of this thought is essentially my surprise at being offered the position. Even though like some of my credits and my skills line up with this, it's not something that I was seeking or had really considered pursuing until it came to me. So I think in that sense, that sort of sense of where did this come from is leading me to doubt my position there. And then the counterfactual part, I laid out some counterfactual statements to answer the question, if in fact I am qualified for the position, how would I know? How could I tell? So number one, I would probably be receiving good feedback from my coworkers, which is true, I am. I'd probably be receiving good feedback from clients, which is true, I am. I would be receiving opportunities to expand my sessions, to grow in this field, which is false, I'm not. So that's the one piece of evidence that confirms what I'm thinking so far. And then I would have a sense of confidence about my work, which is sometimes true. I do, especially coming off of a good session, I do feel confident that what I'm doing is useful, it's helpful, and that I'm qualified to do it. But the fact that I even have this thought in the first place means that sometimes that's false, that I don't feel confident in it. So that's my analysis of that thought. And again, it's helped me hone in on how confident I should actually be in that thought. So Alex, any feedback on that?
Yeah. Do you feel like you have a predisposition for feeling this way about other things you do?
Yes. I think yes.
Do you feel this way about something that you have an expertise in your primary field of study?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Probably to a greater degree, actually.
So you feel less confident in what you feel worse about the thing that you know more about.
Yes.
Okay. I think that seems to line up with a lot of, I forget what that like principle is, but the more you know about something, the more you feel like you don't know.
Yeah. I forget the name of it too. There's that curve of confidence where the more you know, the less confident you are. Somebody else brought up in the chat imposter syndrome, and yeah, that's a little bit of what I'm feeling there. I think imposter syndrome tends to describe more like when you have success, feeling that your success is undeserved. I think this is maybe related to that. Like there's a Venn diagram, but I don't think it's exactly imposter syndrome.
One of the things that I feel that when I start something new is when I compare it to my primary area of expertise, I see how different my level of knowledge is. Just I do not, if I don't understand something at the intuitive level, I feel like I don't know what I'm talking about. Even if in a work structure I know enough to be confident in my job, I don't feel like I know enough because I'm always comparing it to that thing that I've been studying for decades.
Yeah. All right, cool. Are you ready to move on to having some people who completed the exercise talk about what they got from it?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so the only person who posted so far in the chat was Maritza. If anybody else who came in after I asked this, if anybody has completed the exercise and would like to give maybe a 1 to 2 minute summary of what they got from it, let me know in the chat and we'll line you up. So Maritza, if you're willing to share, you have the floor for a minute or two to let us know what you thought of this exercise.
Okay. So I do have to say that I kind of really hated it. I have about 1 million thoughts going through my mind all the time. And for some reason, when I set to do the thought analysis, and it popped up because I put it in my calendar, right? So I did the same time every night. It popped up on my calendar, and I pulled out my pencil to write. And the only thoughts that came down were negative personal ones. And so I will say that, out of 7 days, 6 of the days are dispreferred thoughts in the valence section. For the sources, I struggled because my initial thought that the source was within me. So I had to pause and think a little harder to consider from whence it came. I will say that I really wish I had watched the video you guys posted earlier before I started the exercise. I actually didn't watch the video till today after I finished, right? And it was Jordan Peterson. I didn't realize it was going to be Jordan Peterson. And it clicked. The entire week I'd been doing this exercise and I didn't actually believe in it. Like I didn't quite understand what I was supposed to get out of it. And for some reason, hearing it through Jordan Peterson's framework made me think of the preface to his book, Maps of Meaning, where he himself is going through something and he says, he has an inner voice that says, oh, I don't really think that. That's not really my thought. I didn't really think that. Why am I thinking these things? And that revelation made him more inclined to be cautious when speaking and to ensure that what he said had meaning. And I think that's what I got out of this exercise. In going through the 4 steps and analyzing the thoughts that came to me, I found that I often throw away or ignore and don't address those dispreferred thoughts because I do tend to prefer speaking with caution and speaking with meaning. So in general, those dispreferred thoughts don't get a voice. But sitting down and writing them down in this 4-step analytical format gave them a voice and a mechanism for throwing them away, as it were. And I thought, in the end, I thought that was valuable.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's great to hear. Thank you for giving your feedback on it. And I'm glad that you were able to find some use in it. Cool. Next up is Stephen, followed by Joe. Stephen, you've got the floor. Thank you, Maritza.
Yes, thank you. So as background, I'm pretty tough on myself, pretty negative about my confidence. But the valence and the value part seem very obvious, that, you know, whether something is going to be good for you or whether it's bad for you. Also, I have a history of reacting to, or letting other people, reacting to other people. So this exercise forced me, the only couple of times that I did it, because I more wanted to avoid it, made me face these, I guess, demons, and realize that, and I was aware of this already, and I have taken actions to adjust my behavior, is that letting other people affect how I feel. And I think the purpose, at least I was wondering, well, what's the purpose of this exercise? And I thought, well, maybe it is to figure out the how you act based on your thoughts and where are those thoughts coming from. So I was extra careful not to attribute my thoughts to somebody else, that these are my thoughts. So, but the source is also, one of mine was taking a yoga class virtually, and the instructor saying at one point to think of what something you appreciate about yourself, or something, something positive about yourself. And whenever I'm confronted that, so that's a wall goes up, because I, just don't want to even answer. And this, well, why? And it's more not this person that's instilling that in me, but that it's coming from within. So it can be very effective if you're willing to face your thoughts. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, exactly. I think the topic of source is so important when you're thinking about thoughts and beliefs. And often the source is mixed, especially when you have a belief that's been around for a long time. The source could be yourself, it could be someone else way down the line. But what may be more important is like reinforcing factors. If a long, long time ago you were told, there's something wrong with you, and then you tell yourself that over and over and over and over, and that accumulates more than the original thought. Like, just going through that exercise of thinking about where did this thought come from is so valuable. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Stephen. I appreciate it. Joe, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be very brief here, but that was actually something that I had experienced as well, as the idea of the original thought. Where is it coming from? And, you kind of start to identify the root of certain traumas, I'll just say. And so the idea that I did have a lot of negative thoughts, in the course of doing this exercise. I did it for the, first few days. The one thing that was really interesting is the counterfactual aspect of it, because, there's not a lot to justify my thoughts. And, some of them, some of them were very personal. So I won't go into detail, but the counterfactuals were eye-opening because I couldn't prove my thoughts to be true. And what it was a little bit overwhelming in that process is, what do I need to do to change my thoughts? And the thing that I kind of recognized, which felt, and I'll share this, a little overwhelming, is that I just need to take more action on actually overcoming my fears. So that aspect of Napoleon Hill's book actually came out in this process. I had, detailed written notes about that because I made a journal entry just about that in particular. That if you can overcome your fears with the counterfactuals. So, that many of the things that when you're discovering what is true, they're just not. And I think that it's a powerful tool in that regard, but I can honestly say that it's a very painful tool. And, so how often I use it, I don't know. But it's valuable, and it did teach me something about myself in that I just need to do something. It'll prevent me from avoiding things that I wouldn't otherwise, maybe, because there's just simply things that aren't true that I now know. So I found the counterfactual part to be the most important part. The source in certain cases was not necessarily always clear to me. I mean, so that was, that was a little bit more difficult, whether it was my conscious or certain. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Sometimes the subconscious was pretty clear, but anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Cool. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of the relationship between counterfactuals and fear. And I think that's an important thing to be aware of. I'm going to think a little bit more about that. But the comment about actions, like, I love this. I mean, actions follow your beliefs, but often those are, implicit or subconscious beliefs, and actions follow your thoughts. But in the same way, thoughts follow your actions. And so, wherever you start, it really is important to get your thoughts aligned so that you're taking proper actions. However, if you're having certain thoughts and you need to act first to overcome them, things like fear, like, often action is first. I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink, and Jocko has this awesome. He did this Q&A session. So for anybody who doesn't know, Navy SEAL, leadership trainer guy, extreme ownership. I'm not going to give more than that. Has an awesome podcast. I'm enough of a fan. It used to be back here, and you can look in earlier podcast episodes. Now it sits on my desk. I have a mug, a Jocko mug that says "Get After It." But he's got this awesome thing where he was answering someone's question of what's the first step to overcoming fear. He says, you just answered your own question. The first step to overcoming fear is to take that first step, is to do the action. Don't wait for the fear to subside, because that's succumbing to the fear. You have to step into it, and that's how you overcome fear. Anyway. All right.
Can I just really add really quickly
Sure.
to that?
Yeah.
Just very, very quickly. One of the things that you did mention is that was really kind of clear in the book is how our thoughts and our deeds, essentially it was called out in the Napoleon Hill book, is essentially how our thoughts, the links between our thoughts and our deeds.
Yep.
And I did see that. That was very, very clear. And as well. So that was something where, again, the counterfactuals helped with that as well. So I just wanted you mentioned the thoughts and actions as well. So
awesome. And we'll be talking a lot more about deeds in 2 weeks when we talk about rendering useful service first. All right. We've got Julie next, and then we will dive into this week's topic. Julie, what did you get from the exercise?
Well, I just wanted to say something about fear. When I started to challenge my own fears, oftentimes it was vague and I couldn't even describe what I was afraid of, but it pinned me down my entire life and kept me from acting. But when I have challenged it, wondrous things has happened. And if nothing else, when you take action, you find out you don't die. If the worst case scenario, you don't die. But if you stay pinned by fear your whole life, you're actually confirming every time you inaction is confirming the reality of whatever fear you have. So
Yeah. And I just looked it up. So we're at week 3. Week 9 is going to be all about fear. So unfortunately, we got like a month and a half till we get to the fear episode, but it'll be there. We're going to do there's a whole principle on fear and how to treat fear. So we will for sure get to that. And fear is going to keep coming up as we do any of this stuff. So, all right, let's jump into this week's principle. We're going to have a quick discussion and we will do the exercise again. Last warning, if you don't have something to write on, something to write with, you will need it for the exercise. Let's jump in. So this week's principle: decide definitely what you want from life. Then create a plan for attaining it and be willing to sacrifice everything else if necessary, rather than accept permanent defeat. So, first of all, Alex, do you have any reaction just to the principle by itself before I get into some of my questions about it? Like, is there anything that just strikes you right off the bat?
Yeah, this is something I always have thought about since I figured out in a career sense what I wanted to do. And I think there's a certain section of this. It's the be willing to sacrifice everything else that's always given me a lot of pause and a lot of thought. Because some of the people I've experienced in my industry, I think, have looked at that and accepted it. But what their sacrifice is, I'm not willing to accept. But what I feel like I've learned recently is what the sacrifice is for me, I am willing to accept. So I think there's some things about this statement that are important to break down. So first, we can talk about, first of all, just how do we decide what we want out of life, right? How do we assess that? And how do we know that that's something that is going to be consistent and that we can rely on, and that we're not going to just change our mind in a month or a year or 10 years? Mm-hmm. Or if we do change our mind, how do we set ourselves up for that?
Yeah. And that's an especially important question for everybody, but I think young people struggle with this a lot. And I remember struggling with this a lot. And, it took me a long time to figure out where I was passionate enough to pursue in a meaningful way. And, there are a lot of ways to do this. There are a couple of pieces of advice that I've heard over time. There's a book called, I don't think I have it in here. I think it's out in the living room. There's a book called The Curmudgeon's Guide to Getting Ahead, which is it's a super tiny book. It's awesome. There are some things in it that are like very clearly written by a stuffy old school curmudgeon saying like, here's how you survive in my world. But there are some pieces of advice in there that I think go really against the grain. And one of them is that every high schooler should take a gap year as soon as they graduate, and they should travel and get a job. And like, don't worry about going to college, don't go to trade school, don't worry about your career, like travel and get a job, meet people, do things. And the idea is it's really hard to know what you want when you are 17, 18 years old. If you move into the wrong field, like unless you're lucky enough to know what you want out of your career and, to not be delusional about that, it's really hard to make that decision at 18. This is what I would like to sink my life into. You don't know the world. Unless you need to travel around, you need to meet people you've never met before from places you've never been before. You need to experience things you've never experienced before. You don't know what you want until you've experienced those things. And Shrikant will back me up here. Higher education, the way that it's laid out in this country, like the college system, is not set up for people's success. It is set up to an old school inherited system that is not built for the modern world. It has incentives in the wrong place in terms of money. And if you slot yourself into that system without totally knowing what you want, like, you are just setting yourself up for regret and debt. So anyway, that's one method, is the travel and meet people. The other thing, which is really quick, get a job that kind of sucks and then pay attention to your thoughts. I learned this from Casey Neistat. He's a YouTuber. He said, get a job. Like, he got a job, I think it was like Wendy's or something, and he hated it. But what he did was he paid attention to what he was thinking about when he was at work doing something he hated. Like, what were his fantasies about? What was he dreaming about while he was there? Because it was such a raw environment where you were not distracted by things you kind of like. It's just, this is awful. I'm washing dishes. I'm flipping burgers. I'm doing whatever I hate. Let me pay attention to the things that I'm dreaming about, that I want to get out of life. And that's where, he sort of figured out that.
Yeah, and I just want to back that up for 2 examples. I feel like that was the path I needed to really feel like I was willing to sacrifice everything I needed to for what I wanted to do. It's only when I went and worked in a job that I really disliked and just watched myself be pulled back to a certain path, and just over time getting back to that, just by nature, not even necessarily by decision, but just slowly gravitating back towards it, and then really understanding whatever all of these other things I could do will be pulled back to that. And it doesn't need to be narrow. It can be a wide path, but it needs to be going that direction. And just the other thing to back up what you said about the gap year, my dad was a college professor for like 30 years, and he always said the students that did best were the older students who came back after doing something they hated. They always valued what they were learning and cared about it, and were more successful in their careers.
Yeah. Amazing. I think deciding what you want out of life it's so important. And now, for people who have passed that decision, I mean, we're talking a lot about career, but you can make this decision at any point in your life to decide what you want out of life and move forward from there. For people who have had a career, who are maybe not, coming out of high school into college, like, deciding what you want out of life is hard. And then the other part of this is life's price. I mean, for me, like, what does it mean to sacrifice everything else? If there's something that you're not willing to sacrifice, does that mean that you haven't properly described what you want out of life? Like, that's what I would think. Or is it more a matter of not having the right balance between sort of discipline and proximate desires? If what you've decided you want out of life is to be healthy and fit, and you also want a pint of ice cream, like, I think those are different wants. It would be hard for me to say what you want out of life is both to be healthy and fit and to be able to eat a pint of ice cream. I think that's what the sacrifice, I don't know, maybe there's got to be some form of clarity there somewhere. But what does it mean to sacrifice everything else? How do you determine what life's price for what you want really is?
Exactly. And what are the necessary sacrifices? And one of the things that I was thinking about was the element of creativity in paying life's price. Like, somebody could, just like spin the wheels in what they thought was sacrificing to pay life's price for what they wanted, but it could have been just an inefficient way of getting there. So I think there's an important element of being smart and using your thinking mind, thinking your own thoughts, and really figuring out how to get there efficiently. Because obviously the whole point of this is you can't avoid paying life's price. But I don't think that has to be a universal. Some people will have to pay a lot less for certain things. For the same goal, some people will have to pay a lot less because maybe they don't have as much they need to sacrifice, or maybe something to them is not a sacrifice. So I think I think it takes a lot of thinking and thinking over time. And what I feel like has helped me with this is journaling and watching the things that pop back up. Like you said, like the person with the pint of ice cream. For me, it's other things, but when those keep coming up, I think they need to be assimilated into what you want from life and then merged. And if that means slightly bringing down what you want and the other thing you were focusing on, but it's true to you, I think that can be a necessary restructuring.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there is also something to be said for reaching for an unattainable ideal, like without bringing those things down and sort of demanding the highest level of everything while integrating those things. Because I think that even if you fall short of your ideal, it gives you a place to aim, right? If you have too low of a quote unquote ideal self, you reach that bar, then I think you set yourself up for complacency, which will kill you. So, anyway, I think it's about time for us to move on to the exercise. We'll see if we can do this in 5 minutes. The thing that I'll say about this exercise, I ran one of my friends through this week. He called me this weekend and said, "Hey, there's some stuff going on in my life. I would love some guidance from you." And we ran through this exercise in detail. He's probably spent now maybe 2 hours doing this, and I think it's really, really clarifying. So I recommend spending that amount of time on it. That's what I'm going to be doing this week. But just so that we're clear, let's do the 5-minute version now, and then we'll branch off into breakout rooms. So on your piece of paper and pencil or typing notepad that you've gotten out because I asked you to 3 times. First thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a description in detail of your ideal future self. Now, for me, this is going to look like a D&D character sheet, right? It's going to be very bullet pointed, fragmented. It's not going to be prose. It's going to be bullet points and like almost looking like statistics. For some people, this may turn out more like prose, where you've got paragraphs describing, maybe in a story sense, what your ideal future self looks like. But you're going to do this in 2 ways. First, think of a character that you admire. Could be from fiction, could be reality. Captain Picard. And describe some of the traits that you admire about that person that you would like to embody. Right, so that's the first step. And we're going to go through this quick because we're going for 5 minutes. Worst case, like I said, you can complete this later this week. You should be thinking of a set of characters, but for today, just pick one and pick a character trait that you admire and write it down. Take the next 10 seconds to do that. Okay, now think of a life situation that very likely will affect you in the future. It could be something like the death of a family member or, economic turmoil. The negative ones might be a little easier to work with in the short period of time, but ideally you should be thinking of positive and negative things. Birth of a child, increase in your paycheck, like your next raise, being offered your dream job. So, pick whatever you'd like for now. I think the negative ones are a little easier to work with, and describe at least one action or trait that you would like to embody in that scenario. What kind of person would you like to be when you are experiencing that thing? Like I said, death of a family member, get offered your dream job. Like, who do you want to be in that situation? And I think crises are the easiest ones to work through. Again, I'll give you about 10 seconds to write down a scenario and write down maybe just one trait, one thing that one word or one phrase that embodies who you'd like to be in that situation. I see everyone writing furiously. It's excellent. All right. A couple of heads came up. All right. So now these traits are traits of your ideal self. So you're going to transfer to your character sheet or your master list these traits, these ideals of who you would like to be in that situation, and the character traits of somebody that you admire, that you would like to embody. This is going to be the foundation of your character sheet, so to speak. And I'd like you to add some other things in there that might matter to you. Things like, where does your ideal future self live? How much money do you make? Or what's your net worth? What kind of work are you doing? What kinds of hobbies and habits do you have? You know, this is what you should build this out to. If you have any ideas right this second, feel free to start writing them down, but I'm going to keep going so we can fly through this, because we really are doing the 5-minute version. And I think you'll see what this can expand into. And I hope that you spend the rest of this week doing some work on this. So those are just 2 examples of how you should build this character out. But think of some other ways throughout the week to build out this ideal future self. Because here's the thing, you will become your future self, ideal or not. And the only way to become your ideal future self is to understand where you're going and not stumble into it, to be deliberate, to get from life rather than getting through life, as my friend John says. Now, steps 2 and 3 are a little simpler, and we'll do this in the last 40 seconds here. Step 2, identify the gap between you right now and that person that you are filling out. What's the difference? If your ideal future self is meditating 6 days a week, how often are you meditating now? What's the difference? And then lastly, identify the steps that you need to take to close that gap, and what are the things you need to sacrifice to get that out of life. So that's the task for this week. I've explained it in 5 minutes. Hopefully you have begun it in these 5 minutes. It is an ongoing process. But that's the exercise for this week. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for listening to the Switch podcast and participating in our Outwitting the Devil series. Again, this was week 3. Decide definitely what you want from life, then create a plan for attaining it, and be willing to sacrifice everything else if necessary, rather than accept permanent defeat. Alex, do you have any closing thoughts?
I just think this is a important thing for me, because I do feel like without a clear goal, and then this after that, breaking down how do you get there, I do, for me, I feel like it's hard to remember the importance of those daily habits, because that second part for me is all about what I'm doing each day, even if it's 5 minutes.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great time in the breakout rooms. Good night.
All right, folks. So the next steps are as follows. So we're going to go into breakout rooms so we can discuss, what we learned today. We can talk about anything that you want connected to this. In the breakout rooms, one suggestion is it's going to be for 20 minutes. Give everybody who wants to speak a chance to speak first, 1 to 2 minutes. So everything gets put on the table, and then you can have an open discussion. In 20 minutes, we'll be back in this main room, and then we'll be going to, the takeaways. What I want to do is I want to show you this 5-minute technique that I have, that I learned from, it's called the Yoda timer. Okay, I want to actually try it. So we'll do like a really intense version of exercise, 5-minute exercise after we come back. And then we're going to talk about our takeaways. All right, so with that, I'm going to start the breakout rooms. Give me just a second. Yeah, starting the breakout rooms now. Hi, Marisa. Hi. Can't hear you. You're on mute. Yes.
Oops, sorry, I forgot to unmute.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back. All right, so what we are going to do is we are now going to try to take this exercise and I want to show you this one technique, okay? It's called Yoda timer, okay? The basic idea is very, very simple, okay? If you ask yourself to do a very difficult thing in a very short period of time, you will surprise yourself with what you can do, okay? So what we are going to do is that this is a fantastic exercise. It's a very simple exercise, right? Number one, what's your ideal self? What is your ideal self? So you answer that. Number two, you answer what is your current self and what's the difference? And number three, what steps will you take to do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set, and don't actually try to figure out your ideal self, okay? Take about a minute. Do your best to try to capture it as best as you can, okay? Then current self, you don't need to spend too much time on, okay? You just look at the difference. The difference will be very apparent to you because the moment you set the ideal self, it's like a beacon. Moment you see the beacon, you immediately see where you are, okay? And then you say, okay, how do you go? How do you go towards it, okay? Even if you do a fantastic job of just putting your ideal self, do not move forward until you put your ideal self, okay? Suppose you do put your ideal self, that's great. If you think you have got a good handle over what your ideal self is, then go to the second one of what the difference is. Only when you have good handle over that, go to the third one, okay? So even if you manage to do only the first one, that's fine, which is, setting your, identifying your ideal self. All right, so I have a most powerful device here. It's called a timer. Okay, so I'm starting 5 minutes, and I'm promising you that many of you are going to be very surprised with what you're going to do. Okay, what you're going to be able to do. So I'm starting the timer now. Go. Okay, I'll give you about 10, 15 seconds to wrap up if you would like. All right, folks. Okay, so want to talk about your takeaways from this exercise or from the meetup in general. I'm going to collate everything that people say. Try to be brief, try to be take about a minute or so, or what you got. And then we will go from there. All right, I'm going to keep track of everything that is being said, and then we will look at the patterns in that and focus on the general patterns. Okay, so I'm going to go in the order in which I see people. So it's going to be Marisa, William, and Brian. Marisa, go ahead.
I have to confess, I missed the last question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Are we doing takeaways?
Yeah, you can do takeaways either from the exercise that we did right now, or from the meetup, or from anything else.
The exercise is cool because you're writing stuff down before you've realized that's the thought that came to mind. So that's kind of really neat there. The exercise itself, if I'm thinking about it, is scary because of the statement. Decide definitely what you want from life and then create a plan for attaining it. And that doesn't sound so scary. But the second part, it says, be willing to sacrifice everything else if necessary, is frankly terrifying. It looms as an unknown within my psyche that seems to invite a disruption of my status quo. And I know that requires further examination. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think the projection of the ideal makes a huge difference, because having that beacon clarifies things. And even if you don't do a good job of identifying it, just starting to move towards it, you will get the feedback.
Right. Well, and that I feel like that second part also forces you to be more realistic with your ideal. Because if you're going to sacrifice everything else, well, then you can't wish to be future king of the world, because that's too unrealistic. And I may not want to sacrifice ice cream every day to be king. So it's yeah.
Yeah, and the other part about this is that definitiveness of purpose is huge, because, for example, suppose you make a mistake of sacrificing something that you should not have sacrificed. You will find out.
Yes.
Instead of giving them,
yes.
maybe I want this, maybe I want this, maybe I want this, you're actually not able to pursue any of them. But by saying no to something, you would say, oh, if it is actually something that you need, the need for that is going to grow over time. And you will say, okay, the formulation I had was incorrect. So
I want to say, if someone has a problem with the word sacrifice, I ask them to interject the phrase opportunity cost, because I find that will fit spot on in the same manner, and it describes what you're saying. You may not view it as a sacrifice, but then in the rear view mirror, it may reveal itself to have been a sacrifice. Yes.
Thank you, Marisa. Great comments as always. Next up is William, Brian, and Joe. William?
Yes, I really like your Yoda timer 5-minute exercise, Shrikant. It's almost like self-help speed dating. And you have to do it so quickly that you don't have time for negative emotion to take over and your ruminating mind to talk you out of this. So I really like your exercise. I think from the breakout group that we had, my takeaway from that was something Jordan Peterson talks about is, in terms of your ideal self, maybe it's helpful to imagine 3 different paths that you could take. That way the pressure isn't on so greatly that you have to make this ideal self. You could have a spiritual path, you could have a career path, or you could have a happiness or spiritual path. And by seeing the different paths, I think it's just easier to visualize and realize you've got options. It's not just a one-way path. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, William. Great comments. Next up is Brian, Joe, and Julie.
Okay, I'd just like to say thank you to the 2 guys who have left, who gave the example of their exercise from last week. That was very interesting. As far as this 5-minute exercise goes, it was quite interesting just to go through it. I convinced myself in the first 30 seconds that I wouldn't, but I did get all the way through it. So it was very simple what I put down, and will need expanding. But I ended up with a good framework that I think is achievable. Okay.
Brian, I mean, that was great. Thank you. That's what ends up happening. Like, actually, our mind is very fast. Our automatic, see, the way in which, the reason this exercise works is actually it leverages something about our mind. If we set a purpose, then we've got this large brain, which is able to see patterns. So the moment you say, okay, that's what you need to do, it will bring things together very, very fast. If you tell the brain, oh, you have plenty of time, it's not going, it's too vague a guidance in order to leverage it. And but our, this is our kind of right brain, this is our ability to make associations, to form kind of intuitions. This method leverages that. So absolutely. And it's, within a, sometimes, and the way it works, the mind works in flashes. So you just kind of get something. And it's a result of a lot of things that you have done in the past. But it happens very fast. So that's why this method works. Next up is Joe. We're going to go with Joe, Cynthia, Joe, Julie, and Cynthia. Joe, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I too enjoyed this exercise. I think that it really did cut through the muck. I mean, I am shocked how much I was able to put down with the ideal self, and then I was able to even prioritize out of that within that 5 minutes, which ones that I want to work on the most, which was actually kind of very helpful. It was even actually brought a certain level of tranquility to me as well, because you kind of, I wrote down the ideal self in its totality and some things that I'm not as far on, so it was actually a positive reinforcement in that regard. So that was very, very helpful. One of the things that I took away from the breakout rooms was from Jeff, was the idea of how important it is to be balanced. And when setting up our ideal self. And so that was something that I really appreciated a lot. As far as the only other thing I would like to add is that one of the very important things in this process of the ideal self is the, how virtue fits into it. And I think that that's really helps, like kind of mapping two virtues, how these things, we should think of things in those terms. And I try to, I think a lot of Stoic principles really came out for me in reading the second half of the book, that very much the idea of, desire or even temperance was very, very clear and evident to me. And so that's, I took quite a bit away from this week. So thank you for everybody for their comments, and I'll leave it at that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Julie, Cynthia, and Jeff. Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with William that with both exercises, that the quickness of them, the things just kind of came out without me editing them, so it wasn't difficult at all. The first one we did with the before they left, just putting those ideals on another person kept me from like coming in there and saying, well, I can't see that in myself. So they flowed because of that aspect of it. And then Shrikant, when you did yours, I'm really glad you started with the ideal self, because I have so many more of those. And I really do believe that by going towards the light, the darkness falls out. And I've been way too much focusing on in the problem from the problem. So I thought that was great. And I agreed with Maritza about the word sacrifice. I have a problem with that. I wrote down let go, because a couple of things that are in my way, I'm well aware they're in my way. And it was like a reminder. These are things I can do. Let it going. I can do that. So the whole exercise reminded me of things that I need to do that I can do, and also a lot of what I'm already doing. So it was very valuable. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. Next up is going to be Cynthia, Jeff, and Dave. Cynthia, go ahead.
Hello, I just want to say how very, very grateful I am for being able to attend this group, and in an effort to make myself the best version of myself, I would just like to share some love with you guys, if that's okay. So I love you all very much. Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here. Thanks for letting me hang out. I found the exercises very good. I can see where they would provide someone great benefit, just in the short term and the long term. So thank you so much for that. And Dude, thank you so much. Like this is my fantasy to be in a room full of philosophers. So thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate you being here. Thanks. Next up is Jeff, Dave, and Linda.
So Shrikant, I feel like in some ways, you know, the soil was tilled and fertilized and watered, and then you really brought forth the living thing, you know, from each of us sprouting, and that was very powerful. And I experienced it not just for me, but in listening to the folks in the breakout and seeing seeing how humble and thoughtful and open they are, and the ability to encourage them to be bold. I didn't say this to them in that meetup, and so I'll say it to them now. I was really encouraging myself. I was really talking to me, and so thank you for, and I hope that you gained from my encouragement of you. But that was as much a conversation with me as it was with you. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Next up is Dave, Linda, and Joe.
Thanks, Shrikant. I have a little bit of advantage because this is a project I've been thinking about for a while. I need to minimize, simplify my life, sell the big house I have and move to either a smaller house or maybe a retirement community. But I was thinking about both my parents and my grandparents went through this process. Of course, the unfortunate thing is I have my grandparents' dining room table. I have my grandfather's old wooden wheelbarrow in the backyard. So a lot of stuff that got passed down to me, I don't really have children of my own, so I don't know who I'm going to pass it down to. But anyway, it's a useful exercise to think about how to achieve your goals. And thanks for a good evening.
Thank you, Dave. Next up is Linda, Joe, Yippidi, and Marco. Linda, go ahead.
Okay, so my ideal self. Actually, maybe this sounds kind of proud, but this is what I have. I think I have already achieved a lot of my goal. Like I have an ideal weight. My son has grown up to be a pretty good young man. You know, I have a goal to write a book. I've written my book. I used to want to be a best-selling author, but you know, I know that takes a lot of work. So I don't know about wanted to do the work to do that. But one goal that we identify is legacy. I wanted to teach self-help to high school students. And I think the way to do that is to be a substitute teacher, because it's kind of like, you know, you're babysitting the kids. So the curriculum is kind of open. So I would like to teach some self-help skill to high school students. And the gap is just the taking the CBEST test, which I keep on postponing. So that's the step that I need to take to close that gap. Take the damn test. That's it. So thank you, Srikant.
Thank you, Linda. Next up is Marco, Martin, and Cotton. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, it was like a fun exercise, and I think I got like a little bit too like irrational, but I think I learned from whatever I wrote, and yeah, it was helpful.
Well, thank you, Marco. Next up is Martin. Let me see who else was there. Okay, let's start with Martin. Martin, go ahead.
Yes. Well, I was thinking about first of all, thank you, and I think what like the fear, it's don't understand the total selfness of ourselves, even if it's maybe weird the way that I explain. And also my goal, I mean, I was thinking about, I wanna to be the person that can have more integrity with myself, let's say, and inspired with that thing that I could be, to change the world in a small issues and in a big issues. And I also think that that we need to be realistic to think about the impossible things, and also I think when you choose a goal, or you set a goal, then as that change yourself, and maybe it's not the end of the path, is how you feel searching that path. Maybe not the end or the goal, or not even the path, is how you feel. And if that thing, it's coherence with who you are, because who you are is not what the goal is, or what you feel, or what you think. It's something outside that box. And I think it's about how do you feel in that coherence, searching that goal in that path. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Next up is Cotton, Judith, and Kevin. Cotton, go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, I just have to say I loved my record breakup rooms with Brian, Sharon, William, Cynthia. Thank you so much, because you know I had a really, really, really rough the past couple of weeks, months. I'm like, I have no time to join the meetups, which I really enjoyed every day, but I haven't been. So I kind of like open up my personal life, and I'm like, hey, you know, I'm going from this like $1,000,000 scenario to a hovel. And then they're like, what? What? There's nothing to it. You obviously want the hovel. Your heart is in it. I'm like, what? And that's why I love the philosophers so much, because I consulted so many people. They're like, la, 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 la. But the philosophers are like, wait, it's so clear cut. You want the hovel. Your heart is in it. And that's what I love about the philosophers. And for that reason, I am so, so, so happy and thankful. Thank you. You guys helped me greatly today.
Well, thank you, Cotton, and it's wonderful to have you back.
Yeah,
Welcome
thank you.
back.
I'll be back after everything works out. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Judith, Kevin, and Adrian.
Okay, thank you. I found this really very interesting and useful. I mean, it's something I think we're always working on anyway. And it's interesting to me because usually we're doing it in isolation, all in our heads and our own little struggle. But to see so many people from all over, all walks of life, young, old, and in between, you know, just working on this at wherever the stage or place they are in life is really kind of encouraging. It's like, okay, I'm not in this alone. Everybody's working on this in their own little way. So I like that, and it's encouraging. The other thing is that we spoke about much earlier that I can attest to from personal experience. Action is very useful. Sometimes overcoming fear just by taking an action, because you can just be in your head so much, and sometimes you just have to act. And sometimes you just do act without really thinking, but somewhere inside, you know, and some kind of courage or strength comes out and you do it. So those are the takeaways. Just one last thing. So part of my goal is, you know, trimming out things. So you just really made it hard for me tonight, because like, how can I trim these things out? There's value in everything, you know, and I come to these meetings and I have to trim some things, but thank you so much.
Thanks, Judith. Next up is Kevin, Adrian, and Priya. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Shrink, and present everybody else every evening almost to share the great thought. This opportunity make my brain thinking exercise, good exercise. And my takeaway is I think about the ideal self, about my house, optimistic, find an effective way to communicate with others. For the sacrifice about the party, I would say. Generally, people talk about opportunity and cause. Sometimes it's work, maybe for career, economic sense. Sometimes it's for your spiritual level. Possibly it's not work that way. So priority possibly is a choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Priya, Mike, and Perfect App. Priya, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Shrikant. I had a great breakout room group. And I think the one thing that kind of stands out, or what I kind of want, I guess, try to remember and more often, is how counterfactual is like the anchor to the exercise that we did. If we use that as our anchor, then maybe it can like take away the whatever our negative unpreferred thoughts and beliefs are, or reduce it to some level. The other thing I noticed is that both the last exercise and this exercise, if the last exercise, if you had an unpreferred thought or belief, and then in this exercise for sacrifices, it creates like this very cringe-worthy feeling where you just don't really, you're like, oh, this is just making it hard to pursue. It's like there's a hardship in thinking these things. But we're getting through it regardless. And I have a question or as advice on the next thing is like with the ideal self, that exercise. What if you have so many as characteristics, traits that you'd like to acquire? Should it, like, instead of like spreading ourselves thin by thinking of all these different things, should we be focusing on maybe like one or two, like focus on one, here's the first thing, achieve that, and then pursue the next thing, and so on?
Okay, that's a great question. So we'll come back to that. Excellent question. Next up is Mike, Perfect App, and Stephen. Mike?
Okay, my ideal realizable self depends on the nature of the task that the universe has given me. Depending on that task, I attempt to morph into a new perception of an ideal self to solve whatever problem the universe has given me. Sometimes I'm motivated by motivated by a driven greed and altruism. Sometimes I'm motivated by pressure, fear, humility, and usually altruism. The ideal self, in some cases, is adaptive and flexible. The ideal self, in some cases, is slow, methodical, deliberative, and humble. Sometimes I try to use in some problems, I need to use my mind and physical capabilities to accomplish the objectives. In some cases, it becomes I should depend on what's out there already. Literature search, find an expert who knows how to solve the problem. Sometimes I have to go through the random search Christopher Columbus approach to solve a problem. Sometimes the solution is clear, and sometimes it's a risk mitigation problem. And sometimes you you don't know how to solve the problem, and you throw resources and money at it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. And there's more like that, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it fails.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Next up is Perfect App and Hugo.
Yes. So, yeah, I already set my goal and I work hard, before this exercise, but I'm kind of like struggling because of sometimes I cannot see my goal even I'm working hard. So I feel like I need more practice, how to motivate myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next up is Hugo and Jairo. Hugo, would you like to add anything? Okay. Next up is Jairo.
Yes. Thank you for inspiring me to attempt this exercise. Yeah, when I heard, I think through the chat, I saw the three steps. So as soon as it was put in, I decided to go ahead and try it out. And so in about a minute, I wrote some notes, and it's kind of when I saw ideal self, then I kind of put together some things that I'm fond of doing. So I kind of put like 4 or 5 of them that I thought I would just want to get better at and be able to make more time for. But in summary, I think what I want is to become a child of a pure mind that is fearless, that just is in a playground and dabbles with whatever he enjoys, something like that. I don't know if that counts for being an ideal self, or what does the meaning of ideal mean?
Absolutely. Thanks.
Is it?
Absolutely.
Like,
that definitely counts as an ideal. I think child is a very, very powerful idea. So let me present my my answer to this one. And this is actually a kind of a follow-up on, this is something that I'm going to expand on. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk about how I think about this. Let me see if I can. There may be a slight delay. Don't know what's going on. Okay, give me just a second. Okay, it's coming up. All right. A second, it's processing. I don't know. I'm trying to get my iPad to show up on this one. Give me just a second. Okay. There it is. Okay. All right. So you see my screen? Okay. So this is how I think about everything. And I want to talk about what I am trying to do. So for me, I think human beings have 4 things that they do. We have got 4 different subsystems. We have a system of principles that guide us, that give us, for example, purpose, plans are all in this one. It's in the principles subsystem. Then we actually act on this. So there is action going on. That's the other thing. So these are kind of external things. So principles say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to, these are the principles by which we are going to act. Actions are actually acting on that. And internally, there are 2 things that go on. One is that we deliberate. We ask, do I really know? Is this the right thing? This is kind of our system 2. It's our rational faculty. That's kind of deliberative ability. And then we've got an intuitive ability of kind of having vision. So for example, you're saying, oh, this actually brings together everything that I care about. Okay, so those are the 4 things that I think we do. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm actually very strong on vision. So this is like my most powerful thing that I have going. I am decent at deliberation, and I'm decent at action. I'm good. I think I'm very good in visions. I'm kind of at least average or above average level in both deliberation and actions. On principles, I'm not that good, because what happens is that because I'm very creative, because I continuously keep on coming up with visions, I am not as systematic as I would like to be. And I think if I improve that a little bit, I think I can do a lot more than what I've been able to do. So my ideal self, I have to integrate principles into everything that I do. So actually, I'm starting out a series on principles. On basically, I'm calling it the Principles Project. And so currently, the deepest principle I have by which I live is, you take principled action. So you're always trying to do principled action. What is the base on which you're taking that? So you're trying to do principled action with uninhibited visions and relentless deliberation. So it's like this is your internal mechanism, that kind of visions that keep guiding you, deliberations that provide continuous feedback and checking and correcting process. But what you're trying to do is that you're trying to take principled action. So you're trying to put everything in form of principled action. So that's the form in which I put my ideal, and that's the direction in which I'm going. And in order to do that, I'm going to do a series of meetups on Saturdays at 12:30. So I'm going to use this model to start. I'm going to describe this model in the first meetup, and I'm going to start this process of kind of going out and picking up and analyzing as many principles and trying to integrate about how do you live by principles. That's what I'm going, and that's going to start this Saturday at 12:30. And I invite all of you to come, because I think it's going to be good. At least I'm going to try to make it good. I'm going to try to learn every day, every week, and hopefully, each of you will get something from that too. All right, so that was my take. Now, questions. So the first question that Priya had, what do you do when your ideals are too many? And that's a very good problem to have. And so what you really need to do is to kind of prioritize, see the structure of it, and make hard decisions of saying, okay, these are the ones. I think you kind of have to arrange them in order. And then, the point that he has of saying that pursue what is the highest, and even deliberately leave aside whatever you think is lower. And if it is actually lower, you will get feedback of saying, oh, no, I need to incorporate that. And then you would find that many of them are actually combined in a certain way, but you have to work on them relentlessly in order to actually figure out the structure of it. So the process of action is, like most people, the way they try to solve the problem is to kind of think about it. That doesn't give you it. You get only some things. It's by the process of action that you learn a lot more. So that would be my quick take on it. And it's coming closer to 11 o'clock. I love this series. I think Chase and Alex are doing a fantastic job of putting things on the table. And then, I think the breakout rooms, they're inspiring great breakout rooms. Then we are able to kind of discuss some things. What we'll discuss in this will keep on changing over time. It'll be some kind of thing. Like, for example, today we are focused on ideal self. And a lot of these meetups, the way they work is that they allow for enough space for individual thought. So you would have been walking away with many, many things that you have not even shared. Okay. And that's one of the things. Plus, you're able to share whatever you choose to share and learn from each other. Plus, you get to hear how other people are approaching some things. And you will find applications of ideas and implications of ideas that you never have thought of. So, plus, you get a systematic presentation of various ideas. So it's kind of a lot of goodness kind of packed in 2 hours. That's what we try to do here. All right, folks. So it was wonderful to see you here. We'll see you next time. Bye.